What's up? I see one person's joined here tonight to work on a dropper post. Let me know in the comments if you're, just here to chat and hang out, or if you are following along with your own, because that'll kind of depend how I pace this out. All right, so I realize some of you guys are going to be watching this at a later date. So I would say go ahead and skip like half an hour into this thing, because I posted that this was going to happen at 9:30. Little did I know, when you schedule a live stream, you can either pick 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. So, I went ahead and picked 9 o'clock. I figured I'd go ahead and start the stream now. But probably in the next half an hour, I'm not going to be doing much work on the actual dropper post. So we'll see who joins. We'll chat a bit, get the tools together to do it, and then at that point, we'll go ahead and tackle it. All right, looks like we got one person joining in. How you doing tonight? Leave me a message in the comments. Let's see, live chat. Yep. Much easier to hold that at the bottom and just twist it off as if it were a normal nut. All right, so I realized I had posted, like I mentioned a minute ago, I posted that this live stream would start at 9:30. I didn't know when you schedule a live stream, you can either pick only at the whole hours, 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. So, like I mentioned, you know, skip about a half an hour into this video, we'll actually be getting to the service on the dropper post. I'll actually go over a couple different levels as well of service you can do. I mean, because you can do something as simple as some lube on the, I guess what you would consider like the stanchion. You could also take off the cap and grease underneath there, or you can kind of tear the whole thing apart, get out all the old grease, put the new grease in. So, you know, that's really the method we're going to go with tonight. It is something that I've done before. This came stock on my Rift Zone, Marin Rift Zone 2, 2020 model. I got it, right at the start of 2020. And, you know, it was pretty good at first, and it started to kind of slow down, feel a little like gritty as it went up and down. So I would say maybe a year or so into owning it, I did the same service that I'm going to do tonight on it, and it worked better than it ever had after I did that. Like better than it did when it was brand new. But now fast forward to what is now probably over 2 years, 2-ish years later, or something like that, maybe even more than that. And it's returning very slow again. I've done the easy maintenances, which I might as well just go over those now. So the easiest thing you can do to get your dropper running smooth, even if it's just for a day or two, is some Fork Boost lube, which is this stuff here. They sell it really to put on your fork stanchions, your shock stanchion. The easiest thing you can do is put a couple drips on here, drop the post up and down a few times, and it's just going to lightly lubricate what's on the inside. The thing is, it's so thin compared to grease that it's not really going to last very long. It'll help you out for a ride or two, and that's about it. So the secondary thing that you could do is loosening this collar, which you should be able to do by hand. I put on hand lotion, and my hands are super greasy. All right, what can I get to grab this with? Maybe a towel. Nope, need something more grip than that. I'm not going to get very far with the service tonight if I can't get this thing off. It's come off before, so I know it has to come off. All right, get this on here. All right, the joys of doing this stuff live. So the second easiest thing you can do to try to just get your dropper post running a little smoother is to take this collar off, and you don't have to really worry about anything. Like, it's not like things are going to explode when you take this thing off. The actuator down here is what's kind of really like holding it in place. So you can take this off. There's quite a few threads on it, more than probably necessary. Slide this up, and then you can just pack a little bit of grease in here. So you've got this collar. It's got, I don't know, you know, there's a crevice in there, obviously. And then down, this lighting's terrible, sorry about that, onto here. So you can just pack a little bit of grease in there, and then as it goes up and down, theoretically, it's just going to push that grease further down, hopefully. Gravity doing a little bit of the work on that too. And then literally screw this back on. And it'll help, you know, it'll help for a little while. It'll help certainly longer than doing the fork boost lube. But these are both kind of like Band-Aid solutions, right? Like, you're not getting the old grease out. You're not getting the dirt that's gotten pushed through the seals and the gunk and all that stuff over time. So those are both things that I have been doing more recently. But, you know, like I said, tonight is to do a more thorough service on it. I will also mention that I may be doing all this just to turn around and like let this thing sit in my shop for a while, or just sell it potentially, because I do have a longer dropper post coming. I mentioned it in my last live stream. I got a 200 millimeter dropper post for the Marin Rift Zone 2. It's a large, I'm about 6 feet, and it did not fit. In theory, the 200 millimeters a drop on that PNW post would have worked if I could slam the rest of the post further down in the frame, but the frame wouldn't accommodate for it. You know, the frame seat tube comes down and then turns, and it was just bottoming out on that turn to the point where, you know, it couldn't go down far enough, and then raising it up that 200 millimeters from there was just way too high. So I've done the warranty deal with them, or not the warranty, the return, and that was pretty smooth. I mean, they responded really fast, like within one business day, and basically I sent them the 200 millimeter back. It's not like it's been used or anything, and as soon as they get that back, they're going to send me a 170 millimeter dropper post. So the 170 millimeter PNW dropper post is obviously going to be a little bit better than this. 20 millimeters more of drop, and it's also lighter. I mean, nothing significant. I think it was maybe like 60 grams lighter than this thing, so not a huge deal. But even an additional 20 millimeters of drop, I think, will be helpful. I mean, I do notice, even with the seat drop down, the little bit of jumps that I do, you know, if I'm really trying to like pull the bike up and get that back end up, it'll hit me in the butt. So I don't know, a little bit more space from this should be beneficial. But anyway, I know there's some people that are just joining in. Give me a comment or something, or the chat. Let me know where you're joining from. Let me know if you are here just to kind of hang out and chat. That's great too. Or if you have pulled your dropper off your bike and we're going to be kind of doing this thing together. So let me know. It's pretty basic tools, pretty simple process. Trying to check the chat because I remember last time they didn't stay up on the screen, which was really annoying. I assume you guys can hear me, right? I mean, I didn't test the mic or anything like that. Let me know if you can. Chat, live chat, yeah, cool. Yeah. So I did mention earlier, I don't know if I think for whoever's here now, I was going to start this at 9:30. When you schedule a YouTube live stream, you have to pick either 9 or 10. So I'm like, all right, well, I better start it at 9, because I had just done a YouTube post saying 9:30. So, you know, like I said, we'll just kind of hang out, chat for a few minutes. Yeah, so this may, like I said, it may go back on the bike just for a couple rides till that longer dropper post comes. I may go ahead and sell it, but you know, I like to feel good about selling things. I'd like to feel good when I sell this, knowing that it's in good shape and you know, going to work well for whoever it's going to. So I think it's worth the time to take it apart, grease it up, put it back together. It's not like I'm having to spend money to do that, because anything I need I already have here, and really all you need is like a lightweight grease, like a suspension grease. So what I will be using is SRAM butter, which I've had this little container of it since I rebuilt my RockShox Recon fork. And yeah, this is like, God, what size is it? Doesn't even, yeah, 1 fluid ounce. So it's rebuilt the RockShox fork. I think I had different grease when I rebuilt this the first time, or did the service on it the first time. I've used it recently on my shock. I have serviced my Fox fork, plus I've taken it apart and then used some of this grease when I increased the travel to 140 millimeters. And there's still, a fair amount of this stuff left. So these things last a while. Like, you don't have to go crazy with the grease. If you're just joining in, hit me up on the chat. Let me know where you're coming from or where you are. I asked on the last live chat where people were, how the riding was this type of year, because for a lot of people, there could be zero riding at all. For us around here, I mentioned this before, tons and tons of rain. Things were just drying out this past week, and then it rained again on Friday into the night through into Saturday. So trails closed again. I think some of the trails reopened today around here. I was too busy with family stuff going on, and then of course this hasn't been on my bike for a while anyway. So no riding for me. Good recovery time though. I mean, because I ride quite a bit. It's good to give your body a break every once in a while. Let's see, somebody just said something. Gray Leaf. Oh yeah, I've seen you comment on stuff before, man. How you doing? St. George, Utah. So I guess you're, what, still got decent riding weather out there? So I see a few more people joined in. Let me know in the live chat if you are actually, following along with this procedure with your dropper post, or if you're just here to kind of learn and tackle it at a later date. If you are following along, all you really need are, let's see, yeah, Allen wrench for that, a big open end wrench for this, some lightweight grease, and that's about it. Some rags and something to clean with. I mean, isopropyl alcohol is good if you don't have that. I don't know, brake cleaner or, anything that's going to clean and not leave a residue behind. Probably just wiping it down with paper towels once it's apart would even suffice. So let me know, because I'll kind of try to work the pace of this. If I know people are following along, I'll go a little bit slower. Like I mentioned, I know people are bouncing in and out. I said this was going to start at 9:30. YouTube, when you schedule a live stream, you got to do it at the full hour. So I went ahead and started it at 9. That way anybody joining in at 9:30 isn't, well, if I did it at 10, people would be like, what the heck is going on? He said 9:30. But yeah, so I do want to wait till at least close to 9:30 to start the actual work on this. Mostly dry. Well, that's good, because that's the opposite of what we got here. But yeah, breaking out the cold weather gear. Yeah, it's hard, and it's hard to find like the right balance too when it's cold, because if you wear too much, then you start sweating, and then you start to get really cold after that. I went for probably the biggest bike ride of my life a year ago. I turned 40 a year and a couple weeks ago. So I really wanted to do like a 40-mile ride for my 40th birthday, but I just couldn't get in like a training to kind of work up to that. So, a little bit of a cop out. I just did 40K instead. But that was towards the end of December, and it turned out to be, I don't know, maybe 40 degrees outside as a high that day, or at least low 40s. When I started, it was in the 30s. And I got most of it right, except the one thing I didn't think about was keeping my head warm. I wear a full face IXS trigger helmet, got a ton of ventilation in it. I mean, it's nice even in the summer, but I didn't think at all about like trying to keep my ears warm or anything. I got about a half a mile into that ride, and I was like, oh God, I'm just gonna have to go back home. Like, my ears were so cold. I got back to my car and was just kind of digging around the back of it, and found a microfiber like towel that I think I had actually used it at a car wash. You know, you go to the car wash, it does your car, it leaves spots if you don't dry it, especially like a black vehicle. So I think I had it in there from when I had like just dried my car after a car wash weeks before. So I stuffed that, I just like put it on my head and then just stuffed the helmet over it. And it actually worked out. Like it kept my head pretty warm. And the biggest downfall to that ride, uh, I don't know, it's probably like 5 miles or so into it. I was at Pocahontas State Park, and there's a lot of these little creek crossings that you go through that kind of down and back up, and sometimes there's more water and sometimes there's less going through there, and it's all like rock armored and all that stuff. I went through there and splashed water on my right foot, and like I said, in that 40 or 40 degrees or colder temperature, my foot was so cold. Like by the end of that ride, I was miserable. Like I knew that I wanted to get those miles or those kilometers, those 40 kilometers. And the last, the last 45 minutes of it was just no fun at all. Like, it was just torturing myself, but doing it because I knew I had that goal in mind. And I got back to my truck and I took my socks and shoes off, blasted the heat in the footwell area, and just held my foot like right up to that vent because I mean, I almost was getting to the point that I was thinking like frostbite or something like that, but I don't even know can you get frostbite when it's not actually below freezing? I guess probably not. I mean, I don't know, like maybe it's a combination of the coldness, the wetness, and the wind that could still do that, but yeah, it was not a fun one. So yeah, I won't make that mistake again. Cold weather rides, creek crossing, think a little bit more about where your feet are when you're going through that. So I see a few more people joined in. Say hi in the chat. Let me know where you're joining from, what you're up to tonight. I have mentioned this before. Obviously, I'll mention it again. If you are actually following along, you have your dropper post, and you want to do this with me, let me know. If you're here just to kind of see the process, hang out and chat a little bit, that's cool too. Basic tools, Allen wrenches, open end wrench, some lightweight grease, suspension grease, something like that, and you'll be able to knock this thing out pretty quick. And I did say, all right, yeah, wool socks are your friend on the winter trails. Yeah, I have these kind of like, thick socks that are supposed to keep your feet warm, but I don't think any of them are actually like really wool. I have to give it a try. But yeah, I'm definitely not riding when it's below freezing. If it's cold enough for water to freeze, I will not be out riding. It's just, it's just not that much fun to me at that point. But yeah, I don't know. In the wintertime is especially the time where I try to fit in more of my lunch break rides. I work a full-time job. I get an hour for lunch. Luckily, I'm really close to the trails in the city of Richmond, and I can get out there for an hour, or I can squeeze in maybe like 45 minutes of riding between getting changed and all that other little stuff. But that works really well, in the wintertime because that's generally the warmest time of the day. So I don't have to bundle up too much for that. And also pretty nice is that I don't sweat too much, so when I come back to work, I'm not a giant dripping ball of sweat. But even lately, like it's either been so windy or too rainy. It's just not been conducive to riding around here. But that's why I'm doing some of these maintenance items. I don't know if you guys were here, but I've rebuilt my shock. I did part of that live, the re-greasing and reassembly live this past week. So now we're going to do the dropper post, get this thing working nicely like it should be doing. And then the last thing I think I'm going to do is the fork. I may not do a full service, like not actually replace the seals and replace the foam rings, because they were replaced about a year ago. They probably should be okay now, but it also probably could benefit just from new oil and re-greasing some of the parts on it. So I'll do that, and then, get all those three things done all at once. I should feel like I'm on a brand new bike after that, until something starts squeaking or some annoying little rattle that I'll have to address. So I see a few more people here. If you're here, let me know in the live chat where you're joining from. Let me know, what you're up to tonight, how the riding's been in your area. Let me know if you're joining in to actually do this service along with me, or if you're just here to kind of learn a little bit about it. Now, I will say that this service should be applicable to, well, it's definitely applicable to Trans X dropper posts and Brand X dropper posts, although the Brand X may have a nut here versus a little Allen key bolt. But I think anything with a sealed cartridge, this service will be pretty much identical on. Now, if you've got one where you can add air to it, generally the air valve is here, and if that's the case, I'm not really sure what you would have to do to that. I think most of your disassembly would happen from the bottom here, and that is an alternate way to do the same service that I'm going to do, is really taking everything apart from the bottom. I'm going to take apart partially here to be able to get everything to come apart. Just seems, I don't know, a little easier that way, and it's the way I've done it before, so it worked good then. Why not do it again? All right, so what time we got now? 9:26. I think that's probably good enough. I think if anybody else was going to join in, they would be here already for the 9:30 that I'd kind of said this would start at. So I'm gonna get some gloves on, try to keep some of this grease and stuff off my hands. Some grease smells are they just permeate your skin and you just can't get it out for a couple days even. So if you are following along and you kind of need me to go over anything again or like explain anything better, definitely chime in on the chat, let me know. So as I was beginning to mention, or did mention already, simple tools and some suspension grease is all you really need here. So I've got some SRAM butter. You could also use oleums like honey, probably any other really just kind of like a lightweight grease would be good. Allen wrenches, possibly depending on what situation you have up here, you might need just like a socket wrench to get in there and undo a bolt. I will go over just the two like shortcut ways on this. I know I mentioned it earlier, but I know people are joining in more so at this point. So if your dropper's running a little slow and you just want a quick fix, you could put something like a fork boost lube right onto the stanchion, just drop it up and down a few times, wipe off the residue. That's the easiest way to do it. It'll help you out for a day or two, a ride or two, get it running a little bit smoother. The second easiest thing to do, and it's also the first step of doing this, is loosening the collar. And then you can just apply a little bit of grease here. Well, you could actually start with wiping off the little bit of dirty black grease that's in there. It wasn't black when it initially went in, so you know it's got some dirt contamination and stuff like that. But the other quick and easy fix that'll last a little bit longer than just doing this fork boost lube, take the collar off or just loosen the collar, pack a little bit of new grease in here, and you can actually be pretty generous with it. Slide the collar back on, tighten it down, and then as you're using the dropper post, it's going to go up and down. It's going to distribute that new grease down into here, which will help some, but it's still only kind of like a band-aid fix because you're not getting out the old and the dirty grease that you don't want in there. So that leads us into what I'm going to be doing tonight, which is actually disassembling this. So you have, at least on this Trans X, you've got one Allen key here, and you can try to loosen that, but what you may wind up doing, now this one's actually coming out, which is good, but on some it may just spin the rod that goes all the way through here, and in that case you're not getting anywhere with disassembling anything. So if that were happening, what you could do is take this collar off and then extend out the dropper, and that's okay if you see this little piece start to come out, that's fine. So really what you're doing is actually extending this further than it's kind of supposed to go. You would then start to tighten the collar back down until you get to a point where you start feeling resistance when you're tightening it, like you just can't tighten it those last few threads. And then come up here with your Allen wrench or with your socket wrench and finish removing this top bolt or nut, whatever it may be in your exact case. So that's what's come out here. So that's step one, taking off that top bolt. Step two, I'm gonna check the comments real quick, see if anybody's mentioned anything while I'm not seeing it, because it just goes away eventually. The next step, get yourself a little wrench here. You just want to go across this here, and just like anything else, you're going to go lefty-loosey. It's on a little bit tight. A bench vise would probably help with this, but let's see if I can crack it loose. All right, got a grippy glove here. Yeah, there we go. So this is just going to twist out. Looks like somebody else has joined in. We first took off the top bolt here. If that just spins the rod on the inside, take this collar off entirely, extend your seat post. It'll let it extend really further than it should. Tighten this guy back down, and it'll hold kind of the insides together. So we've taken that out. On the Transex, it's just this little bolt, Allen head bolt. Then we're coming down here, we're taking this bottom portion off, and now everything on the inside, including the sealed cartridge air chamber, is coming out. And this we don't really have to do much to at all. You can just kind of set that aside for now. Let's see. So what's more important to take care of, to clean up, to grease, is everything that is inside of here that is quite gunked up. Yep. And then this. So let me clean this off a little bit and take a little bit closer look at what's on the inside. And I mean, as you can see, the grease is filthy. That was, you know, a golden color grease when it went on. So all right, so got a couple plastic little collars, essentially. Now this was the one that was kind of poking out the top when I extended it. There's really nothing special about this one. Just kind of clean that off a bit. All right, so that can be set aside. Now, what you will see here are these little brass rods, and those follow channels inside of here that is basically what stops your seat post from just spinning around 360 degrees. If I remember right, I think you gotta take those out to get this collar off. Yeah. So I do remember that might have been a bit of a pain getting those things out because they're kind of like press fit in there. Oh, there we go. Two of them came out already. Easy. And it is literally just like a metal rod. Tiny little brass metal rod. So, let's see, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I don't remember how that was when it came out, but we'll figure that out when it goes back in. Let's try to get this last one off. You want to be careful, obviously, not to like mar these things up. There we go. So I've got all three of those out. They will need to be cleaned. They're so tiny that they're hard to pick up with rubber gloves on. And then the last thing that you want to take off, see if anybody's new, say what's up in the chat, let me know where you're joining from, if you're following along to this. Obviously if you're just joining now, I don't know, we're almost completely done with the disassembly portion of this. So you've got one more little collar to take off, and this collar has actually two little slots in it, or it actually has some different slots, and then two little sections where it protrudes up, similar to those little keys, or those little brass rods that just came out. So I didn't really pay attention to the orientation on that. Figured it out last time I did it, so figure it out again. So I'm getting a basic wipe down done on all of these things. Then, you know, I'll give it a go with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and then re-grease it and put it back together. So this can now come off, and I mean the reason you might want to take that off is to clean out the inside of it to some extent. So really the goal of this portion is just get out as much of the old grease and dirt as you possibly can. As you can see, it's pretty grimy in there. So yeah, any bit of dirt, anything like that that's going to cause unwanted friction is what's going to make a post like this slow. And you know, say you had one that didn't have a sealed cartridge like this and you had an air port, you could just put a little more air in it to kind of overcome that as a temporary solution, but that's just not the case here. All right, so that's apart, that's cleaned out. Somewhat. All right, get some rags up here. Any other type of cleaner? I know some are harmful. Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'm going to use to clean it with is like isopropyl alcohol. I think brake cleaner would be fine because it's more or less the same thing. But that is my next step in getting some of this stuff cleaned out a little bit better. So the thing that's going to be almost impossible to fully clean out are, let's see if, yeah, you see the little grooves in there. You know, you can only get those so clean, but hopefully, you know, with the added new grease and getting out most of the bad stuff, that it'll do the trick. You know, I really wish I remember how thoroughly I cleaned this before, because it worked so well after that. But probably, you know, the more time you spend cleaning it, the more time you spend at this particular step, probably the better results you're going to have. All right, stuff this through a few more times. Coming in late here for the open bar and the free food. Yeah, if you find either of those things, let me know, because I'd like to find them too. Yeah, still getting some gunk coming out of this thing, so I don't know. It's pretty clean, and it's way cleaner than it was. So I think that might do it for this particular piece. That can hang out there. More rags. So that might be, yeah, this part, I don't know, can't really get much easier than how you clean this thing. One little groove here to kind of work your way around, and then the rest is easy. All right, cool. That's good for that. Let's see, I realize that's right in the way. If you're just joining in, we are doing the TransX dropper post service, real basic service. I'm actually not even replacing any seals with it. That could be, you know, if you wanted to take it to the next level, I'm sure you can get a new seal kit to go on here. It's really, you know, it's really just this seal. You know, it's not like a fork where there's little foam rings on the inside. So, yeah, I'm sure you could get a new seal for it. And it probably would be advisable to do that, just because it would keep dirt and stuff out, you know, a little bit better. And you wouldn't have to do this as often. But I'm not going to go that far with it. Like I said, it's been on the bike, and since the last time I serviced it was over 2 years ago, so it's obviously doing a pretty good job at keeping stuff out of it. And I would say it's only over the past, you know, maybe 4 or 5 months or so that I've had to start doing the Band-Aid fixes of adding the fork boost lube or popping the collar up and just putting a little grease underneath it. So pretty solid, pretty easy. All right, so I've got the 2 little plastic collars cleaned off. If you're just joining in, you know, say hi in the comments. Let me know where you are, what you're up to this evening. If you got a dropper post of your own that you're servicing, let me know what that one may be. A lot of them, you know, once you take them apart, a lot of these major brand dropper posts honestly are very similar on the inside from what I've heard and what I've seen. All right, so we got the little brass keys. Now this one, it's funny, I remember noticing it last time. One of them was not like perfectly straight, even from the factory. But I don't know, there's not a whole lot that can be done about that. And it went back together just fine and has been working just fine. So not to worry about that too much. So the collar, last thing to clean. More alcohol spray in there. See a few more people joining in. We are, you know, partially through the TransX dropper post service job. I went over some of the easier ways to do it. This is kind of the more complex way. Let's see, Phoenix, Arizona, I've got the 1UP 150 I'll be servicing soon. So is the 1UP 150, is that one that you can add air to, or does it have a sealed cartridge? Do you know about that? And the reason I ask is that I actually don't know the process for ones that you can add the air to, because what we did starting on this one was taking apart from the nut at the top, or from the bolt at the top, just a small bolt, and that's typically where the air valve would be on one of the posts where you can actually add air to it. If that is the case, and I can kind of show you guys on this too, because there is kind of the secondary way of taking these things apart. You can just start it all at the bottom, unthread this, and then, yeah, this thing's so dirty. Ugh. Doesn't really matter if this part's dirty, but it's just dirty to try to demonstrate with. Even where I'm trying to show you guys, it's so dirty. Like grease and stuff in it. Yeah. So the other method that we could have done, and I think it's probably what you would do on the ones where you can put the air at the top, so you obviously can't unbolt it. There's two holes down here, and inside of there are grub screws. So you would unthread this from the bottom, then take those grub screws out, and you're essentially disconnecting the actuator, and then the actuator can slide out, and then everything else slides out the other way. So no, I don't think there's a right or wrong way to do it. Whatever's easier. I think it's easier if you got the sealed cartridge unit to do it the way that I have done here. All right, so I want to clean this out a little bit more. Yeah. Yeah, if you could add air, it's going to be here. Obviously, you'd have to take your seat off to figure that out. Good point, though. Good point, though. Releasing the air from, you know, one of those ones that's not a sealed cartridge, I would say that probably is a good first step. Hands are a little greasy. So how's the riding in Phoenix this time of year? Phoenix, Arizona. Let's see, Anthony. Yeah, how is it out there? All right, I say that's good enough. So we want to get these little collars back on, and this is the one that I actually don't remember the orientation when it came off. There are, let's see if the camera can pick it up, two little nubs sticking out. So I will have to kind of figure out where that's supposed to go. But there's like slots every, there's 6 different slots running down this whole thing. So obviously it's going to go into 2 of those. That shouldn't be a problem. So a little bit of grease. Not going to go too crazy because I'm just going to wind up putting more on here before it all goes back together, but light coating helps. So this was the other one that just kind of floated, and it'll go in its home once everything goes back together. It gets held underneath the collar. Wish these chats would stay up so I could see them the whole time. Good weather, nice and cool, pretty rocky even on the easy trails. Can't beat the views, and you're always only an hour drive away from something. Nice. Yeah, I've never ridden like desert riding and stuff like that, and it looks, you see it in videos, it looks so fun just to see everything so open, because most of the riding here you're just in the woods, and I mean in the wintertime you have obviously more visibility because there's less leaves and stuff like that. But I've always thought that the views you get from that type of desert riding, because even if you go into the mountains in Virginia, I mean it's like dense coverage, and really only like a couple little overlooks on certain runs, but other than that you just see trees everywhere. You don't get these cool views that you see from some of these other areas. But I will say that I'm probably much more built to be in the trails around here with the shade and everything like that, with obviously my complexion and everything. God, if I lived in the desert, I'd be going through sunscreen like crazy, I bet. All right, so these little keys need to go back in their respective slots, which actually I did not clean those out very well. So I actually did grab a heavier weight grease. Yeah, I'd get moonburn, yeah, for real. No kidding. That's one of the things I like doing in the summer here when it's so hot, because it's really hot and humid in this, in Virginia. I'll get up super early and go for rides like sunrise or even before sunrise. And, it's not too hot. Don't even have to worry about sunscreen. It's great. Our trees are rocks, and they are all trying to hurt you. Yeah, it does seem like that in the desert, that every plant is out to protect itself and hurt whatever crosses its path. So yeah, maybe one day I'll make it out there. So yeah, I got this slightly heavier weight grease that I thought might be wise to put on the back sides of these when I try to slot them in, so that it actually holds them in place, versus a really lightweight grease. And they go back in the slot. I think you can just kind of push them back in by hand. I'll know when I try to put this back together. But yeah, should maybe put it in the slot. See if that helps. At least in the case of these, they are kind of rounded off on both ends. I think some that have these kind of wider keys that go in there, they may have a rounded off edge and then a flush. No, that wouldn't make sense either. They need to be rounded on both sides. So yeah, never mind that. Stationed in Norfolk, cool, yeah, that's awesome. I've never ridden down in the Norfolk area. I know, in Williamsburg there's some trails, actually some pretty fun ones from what I've seen. But, where I am, if I'm traveling to go to some trails, I either have the choice of going roughly an hour towards the mountains or an hour away from the mountains to get to those trails in Williamsburg. And I don't know, it just seems like, okay, if I'm taking my time to drive somewhere to go mountain biking, I might as well go to the mountains and get some elevation. So I have not made it out to that Freedom Park, in Williamsburg. Seems like a pretty fun place. But all right, all this is back on. No, I made a mistake. I made a mistake by putting those keys in before I put this collar on. So let's pop those back out. Well, my heavier weight grease idea has held them in, which is nice. Held them in too good. There we go. Just needed a little pick. Top tip if you're doing this from the first time. Alright. Get those things out. Put, yeah, I'm way backwards on stuff here. Alright. Let's fill this thing with a bit of grease. More so, obviously, above the threads, because putting grease on the threads isn't going to do you a whole lot of good. Alright, get that nice and greased up. I've done all kinds of things backwards here because I'm talking too much and not actually paying attention to what I'm doing. Collar first, then all the other little things. All right. Now it is just a matter of greasing this up. I would be pretty liberal here. And then, you know what I think else I would do? I think I would just take a bit of grease and go around here, that as it goes down it pushes some more into it, especially into all those little grooves, and that seemed to have done a pretty good job of that. So when you put this back together, you do want to make sure that your area with all, oh sweet, $5, thanks man, appreciate that. This more SRAM butter. Yeah, I am running low, and I'm sure by the time I redo the fork, it will be gone. So, yeah, appreciate that, man. Thanks. I'll put some more on. Why not? All right, so as I was saying, make sure the numbers are at the back side of the seat post, which is obviously the higher side of those two things. And then lining this up, I'm thinking that maybe that little groove that's sticking out there should line up with that first key. So that's what I'm going to go with for that. Slide this back together. And toss a bit more on here because why not? All right, now back to this guy. Like I said, you don't really have to do much to this. You can put a little bit of grease on here. I don't know that it's actually really necessary, but once that goes in, it's just going to bottom out or top out pretty easily. But put a little bit of this on here. Anthony, oh sweet, thanks man. Appreciate you guys doing that. Definitely not necessary. Was not expecting that at all, but I do appreciate that. Any little bit helps for the channel. So, got the grease back on that. Start threading this guy back on. I am quite greasy, but yeah. This doesn't have to be really that tight. Kind of like to get it a little tighter than that since my hands are so greasy, but yeah, that's good enough. Good enough on that. Check the chat again. Like I said, it pops up and then it goes away, so are there any sports teams I follow in Virginia? I'm a Capitals fan. I used to forever be a Sabres fan until about, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. So my family is from Buffalo. We moved, well, they moved before I was born. They moved a couple years before I was born. And yeah, so because of them, I was a Bills fan, and then I kind of stopped following football. Just not a big football person. I think the game's like slowed down too much with all the replays and all that stuff. It's just hard for me to get into it. I love hockey. I played hockey for a while. I played like, recreational adult roller hockey because, we're in the South here. So I did that. But anyway, became a Caps fan a few years before they won the Cup. Just because, family from Buffalo. I used to visit Buffalo when I was a kid. I loved it. My grandparents were great and all that stuff, seeing family up there, but haven't been there in forever. And why am I following this Sabres team that they're not good. The coaching's just bad. Just everything's just never good for Buffalo sports teams, really. So I just kind of jumped ship and became a Capitals fan, and have been since. I've been up to see quite a few games because they're close enough. Oh, cool, man. Another tip. Appreciate that, dude. You are the best. Yeah, thanks, dude. But yeah, what about you? Sports teams? All right, being is that we extended this, as far as it would possibly go, beyond where it really should go, because that was one of the tips on getting this bolt out. If you can't get it out, if it's just spinning the rod, that's what you would do. So it's not threading in all the way, and that's fine. Don't worry about that at this point. Tighten it down to where you can. Get this little bolt, put it back in. Like I said, in some cases, it may be a nut that's on a bolt, and the bolt stays there. Greasy fingers, or greasy gloves. It's another one that you don't need to go too crazy tightening down. Learned my lesson on that with over tightening plenty of things. Not so much on the bike. No, I did over tighten. I had some Tektro brakes that weren't held in by little cotter pins with little screws, and over tightened that thing, stripped it right out. Luckily, I could just put some cotter pin, tiny little cotter pins in it, and it was fine. Suns, who are actually playing right now. Nice. Diamondbacks, baseball. Giants football. All right, so how did the Giants football happen? Not that huge on hockey, but I'll watch the Coyotes here and there. Yeah, hockey's kind of a weird thing. It's I think you're more interested in watching it if you've played it before, because you get more of the nuances and stuff like that. I don't know. To me, it's just kind of like a good mix. I mean, obviously there's games that are just slow, where they're just back and forth and back and forth, and nobody's really doing much, and those can be a bear to watch. But yeah, unless you played it or seen it live, you know, seeing it live helps. We did have a hockey team in Richmond, of all places, just because it's not a big enough city to have like big sports teams. But we had the Renegades, which back in like the late '90s they won the, I don't know, whatever cup it was, whatever cup it is in the AHL. They had won that. And I forget who it was. Somebody here on the chat said they were in Norfolk for a while. Norfolk had a really good hockey team was coaching at that. He was coaching there probably like 8 or 10 years ago when they won the cup there. And then he's now the coach in Tampa. Yeah, so I don't know. There's more hockey stuff in Virginia than you would actually think. Born in New York, was into football back then and started watching other sports when I moved to Arizona. Well, that makes sense then. Yeah, sometimes it's nice to stick with your home team, I guess. All right, so that's tightened down. That's tightened down. We're overextended here, so I'm just going to manually actuate the valve, push it back in a little bit. Now I can tighten this collar back down. And that literally is it. And I mean, obviously I've been on here for a little bit over an hour, didn't really start doing anything until roughly half an hour into it. So 40 minutes with me talking, doing a couple things backwards and having to redo them. So very easy, absolutely worth doing. Got to take it off the bike to do it. It's a little bit of a pain, I suppose, but let's give it a try here. Yeah, and I think as that grease kind of gets distributed more, it's just going to keep working better and better. I mean, this was never one of those like super fast posts that comes out and it's like pop. So yeah, we're looking good here. Nice. So I would say that's about it. I appreciate you guys joining in, especially for giving me the tips or the super chats or whatever they're called. That's awesome. Was not expecting that. All right, well, I'm going to get this thing, I guess I'm going to put it back on the bike. I don't know. I might wait for the new post to come. We'll see. Maybe I'll put it back on the bike just to get it out of the way. And then if I do have the opportunity to ride, it will be there. So, yeah. Thanks again, guys, for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate you subscribing and supporting the channel, too. That's awesome. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks again.